What if I told you that one of San Francisco's most mind-blowing artistic experiences started by accident? Picture this: a young artist living in a rundown house, fixing floors out of necessity, until those repairs started turning into intricate mosaics. Add a circus troupe, a basement full of creative minds, and an unshakable passion for immersive storytelling, and suddenly, you've got a museum unlike anything else in the world. Today, I'm talking with Gregangelo Herrera, the artistic director behind the Gregangelo Museum, along with his team, to uncover how this one-of-a-kind space went from an underground secret to an official cultural landmark, without ever losing its sense of wonder. It's a story you won't want to miss. This is the Be a Marketer Podcast.
Be a Marketer.
My name is Dave Charest, Director of Small Business Success at Constant Contact, and I help small business owners like you make sense of online marketing. And on this podcast, we'll explore what it really takes to market your business, even if marketing's not your thing. No jargon, no hype, just real stories to inspire you and practical advice you can act on. So remember, friend, you can be a marketer. And at Constant Contact, we're here to help. Well, hello, friend, and thanks for joining us for another episode of the Be a Marketer Podcast. And don't you worry a little heart, because that's right. Kelsey Carter is here. Hello, Kelsey.
Hello, Dave. Happy to be here.
Good to see you as always. I wanted to start, Kelsey, by just doing a little check-in here. I know when you started this role, one of the things that you were concerned with, and we're coming up on, as the time of recording anyway, we're coming up on about a year you've been helping out with this project here.
I know, a year already.
And wow, it's been an amazing year to have you here with us, of course. But I know one of the things when you first started was you were a little concerned about how much of a background in marketing you did not have. Mm-hmm. And so I'm wondering, how you feeling today, almost a year later?
You know, I feel so much better than I ever thought I would. When I first started, I just thought it was this whole world that I was just not in tune with, that I had obviously I know what marketing is, but it's just like I was not involved with that world whatsoever. But having these conversations with these small business owners, a lot of them are also in a situation where they don't know a lot about marketing either. So hearing them learning about the process and having them explain it in terms where they're not necessarily marketers, right, has been super, super helpful. And just hearing like their firsthand experience and just like starting off and everything like that, it's helped me tremendously get my head around it, but then also get my head around how we can have better conversations to help them or just give them better insights to things too as well. Yeah. So I'm feeling so much better.
Well, good. Well, I'm glad. Well, it's been fun to watch you kind of grow and see your knowledge grow and your understanding and how you've been applying it to the things that you've been doing. And the reason I really bring that up is because, you know, as you mentioned, so many of the small business owners that we talk to don't necessarily consider themselves marketing. And, you know, the leader of our group here today, no exception, really has no background in marketing, but as we've learned through our past conversations, right, storytelling really plays a big part in marketing. And like many people that I would say that are in the creative or artistic space, you know, I would argue that they just don't realize how good they actually are at it. So, Kelsey, why don't you tell us a little bit about who our guests are today?
Of course, we have a whopping 3. So our first guest is Gregangelo Herrera, Artistic Director of the Gregangelo Museum in Velocity Arts and Entertainment, which is based in San Francisco. And then we have Angelica Araino, who is the Artistic Manager and Marketing Coordinator. And then lastly, we have Marcelo De Freitas, who is the Creative Director.
Yes. So we've got the small team that really makes the magic happen. And I love the way these 3 really work together and play off each other's strengths. Kelsey, I'm wondering, I mean, how do we even start to begin to describe the Gregangelo Museum?
I know I want listeners to actually Google it as well, because you have to get a visual in your head as well. But just verbally, it's a private home of Gregangelo, and it's tucked away in a quiet San Francisco neighborhood near the Pacific Coast. So him and his team of artists from around the world create unique, whimsical, and imaginative experiences that really spark curiosity and creativity.
Yeah, I mean, they do tours, they do shows, they run events at this place. And really, I think the best way to describe it is that it is an experience, but not in that like fake overused way that you hear people talk about, like creating an experience, right? Like this is like the real deal.
Absolutely. And it's also worth mentioning that the Gargangelo Museum is now recognized as a legacy business in San Francisco. That's really big. That means that it's a long-standing community-serving establishment that is a valuable cultural asset in the soul of the city. And its preservation is critical to maintaining the unique character of San Francisco.
Impressive stuff. And I mean, I found this a really insightful chat. And, I love these conversations with, I'll use some air quotes, like creative types. And in this one, we talk about how the pandemic changed everything for the business, why storytelling trumps selling, and why you actually don't need to spend a lot of money to do effective marketing. So let's go to Greg Angelo as he shares the evolution of his home from an unintentional art project to an immersive storytelling experience and cultural landmark.
Both the Greg Angelo Museum, which started as my home and our headquarters, and Velocity Circus was our first reiteration of a business, came at the same time. It's interesting because the museum, which is now called the Greg Angelo Museum, the public named it that, was always evolving and being built at the same time. It was my home. I'm an artist. It's a headquarters. I didn't have some corporate headquarters. I worked here in the basement, in the attic, wherever. I had a room. At that time, when I was quite young, I was still a teenager. I was renting rooms to many people. So I would work off the floor, wherever I had to do. And little by little, once in a while, a room in the house would cave in, literally. And I would, let me fix that. And then while I was fixing it, let me lab this into some installation I'm creating for a show. So that was happening simultaneously. I didn't set out to create a museum at all, but I was creating a circus troupe that was based in sort of rites of passage, lots of different world cultures, rites of passage that have evolved into circus acts. And I think at that time we had 9 artists, and it was all happening at the same time. So we were working, earning money as performing artists, but we were a byproduct of what we were doing was creating this place that we're sitting in right now. We could talk about that later. We're now 40 something years into it. And there are, if you really listen close, you can hear a mutter of about 10 artists right underneath us in the studio making new work for this place.
Amazing.
Which is more intentional these days. Yeah.
Got it. I just want to understand the timeline here. So 40 plus years, but when did Velocity Arts start? And then when did the museum start?
Okay. Well, I started officially just as Greg Angelo is my stage name. I am still a whirling dervish. That was an act I started with, and I was performing and earning a living in San Francisco, and I attracted many artists at that time. I was solo, but probably in the early 90s, I started Velocity Circus. The museum, what's called the museum now, had started long before that. It was probably started in the 80s. So that did come first, but it wasn't a commercial enterprise at all. It was just a workshop. I didn't think anything of it. And it wasn't until the 90s that mostly our clients would come in, they were very curious about the place, and they would want to look around, and all of a sudden architects and designers and people are coming. And I kind of just kept working on it with whatever artists were here. If we had a slow season, which happens often in the arts, I would just, to make sure the artists were on board, I would train them to do mosaic or gold leafing or whatever, makers. And we keep working on the house to keep them employed. And so that it just kind of slowly continues to evolve to this day. So it was, house started first, not an enterprise. Velocity Circus was the first, entertainment enterprise that made money.
Got it. Tell me about the museum then itself. Was this always the vision when you bought the house, or like?
Oh, no, I didn't. It was a rental property. It was a dump. I didn't think I'd be here that long. I had no vision for it all. It was really out of practicality. I mean, I always joke, one day my brother walked into the bathroom and fell right through the floor. I'm I'm a maker. So I'd let me fix that. Let me get some plywood here and that. And I would kind of makeshift things. And then as it evolved, the story I often tell is one of the rooms in the house, it's called the green room. And it was a very badly decaying room. It was sliding off the foundation. It had lost most of the plaster in there. And I kind of started fixing up as whitewashed. And one day, I will never forget, it was 3:00 in the morning, coming home after performing the Whirling Dervish act. I put my costumes away. I walked by the room, turned on the lights. So, maybe I have a little energy. I'll work on it. And I had bought this can of green paint. And I realized I didn't have a brush. And I was like, what am I going to do? And I just looked down. I took off my shirt, ripped it up in a shirt, and I painted the whole room with my shirt, the base color. I like to tell that story because it's very organic. It's very unplanned. It's very caring in the process, but it's not thoughtfully curated at all until later.
Accidental.
It's accidental. Yeah, it's just sort of real inspiration and real time. happening. But then later, I would say usually through children who visit the house with their families, that the kids, I always say you have to, all the artists stay close to the age of innocence. And when you see a kid come in and something resonates with them, they just blurt out, oh my God, this is this, that. They mention an emotion or a historical thing. And that's where the stories started to evolve from children, actually. And some of the stories run quite deep. I mean, really deep. And the stories keep evolving. Now these days, 30, 40 years later, we're more consciously creating stories that are more relevant to now, especially after COVID. I think definitely all of the world has been experiencing a shift. So we've been really careful in how we present the stories and the art. The art's actually asking the viewer questions rather than the viewer asking questions about the art. The art's asking questions about the viewer. So it's all turned out, and it goes all over the place. There's laughter, tears, joy, going into grief, getting out of grief, going into love, getting out of love, whatever. We never know what's going to happen, but it has a purpose.
So I'm curious then, when does that transition happen, right? You start doing some of these things by accident, but then what was the tipping point that was like, oh, wait, what if we turn this into an artistic enterprise, right? Like,
yeah, well, I did it probably I'd say for the last 20 years. What would that be? And, maybe the late 90s, beginning of the 2000s, there was a lot of interest, and I would just sort of charge people $30 or it was nothing.
Yeah.
Sure, come in, we'd have a guy that they looked around and talked a lot, and there wasn't anything really curated. So we did that for years. It was just sort of a side hustle. It wasn't really to make money. It was just sure, people are curious, let them in. It was a way that clients can come in, other artists can come in. That very soon led to me hosting lunches every Tuesday and Thursday just to have artists and clients come in, because I realized they loved the space. It was exciting. They see the artists working. So, it's probably in the 2000s that it was sort of really starting to go. There was enough to see at that point. Before that, there was always something to see, but I think by that time there was a lot to see. It really, the bulk of the work happened during the AIDS epidemic. It's when culture in San Francisco was drastically shifting. It was dangerous to go out. You couldn't have sex. You didn't want to touch. We didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
But I lost a partner to AIDS. I lost a lot of friends to AIDS in the arts world. And I just kind of turned inward and I started working here. And again, I didn't realize till last year that I was really working out grief by making the art here and really, really going deep with it without consciously knowing it at the time. So a lot of it sort of marking these sort of tragic things that happen in San Francisco, including earthquakes, fires that happen in the Bay Area. It's always been a catalyst to go inward and create art that's more expressive and beautiful, actually, and cathartic, I guess, in the process. But it wasn't intended to be that. Now it is. Now it is for sure.
Yeah. So, Marcelo, I'm wondering, how did you get involved in the whole operation?
Oh, well, I used to run a nonprofit organization in Sonoma, and I hired Velocity and Entertainment to come and do the show part of the event. So Greg came with his troupe, and this was about 5 or 6 years ago. And within 3 weeks, we were working together.
I can elaborate on that. So yeah, he hired us to do a Moulin Rouge. And I have salespeople in front of me. I don't do the negotiations for the business. It's not my forte.
Sure.
He probably hired us about a year in advance, sort of gave us carte blanche and creativity, gave some direction, paid market value. I never met him, never talked to him, didn't know who he was. We show up. He makes fun of me. I always joke, when we show up to an event, we have 3 hours to take what any production company would take 3 weeks to do. So I'm hard hitting. I go in there, we do our job, we're ready. Things are packed up and ready to go. And I think I kind of bowled him over.
He was rough. I was the client.
No, it doesn't matter. He always thinks there's a status. To me, it's like, we're going to do a great job. No one's going to get in our way of failure. Doesn't matter. You're the client, the lighting guy, whatever. We're going to do a good job. And it takes getting there and working. So I kind of bowled him over, but I think I won him over. One thing I always do with our clients is I always gather the artists together, have the client come meet them and say, what's the purpose? What are we here for? What's the purpose? I think that he liked.
So I was not really impressed with him because he was kind of, rough in the beginning. And I was like, oh, my God, I'm going to have to work with this guy. We're here. We have to work together. But then within about half an hour, he called all the artists. There were about, I think, 40 artists that came for the show. And he put everybody on stage. And he called me and he said, okay, now I need you to come in and tell the people, why are we doing this? What's the cause and all that? And that was the first time out of 17 years that I was doing this, that someone was actually interested in the cause. And I thought that was really a defining moment for us to become good friends and go into this venture together.
And I'll elaborate again. So during the evening, it was very well-oiled machine. I've done hundreds of nonprofits, fundraisers, and they're usually shows just because there's boards running them. No one knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
And it's whatever. It's fine. And I was expecting the same thing, but I always want to do a good job. I could tell this man had experience and had probably made some mistakes on the way because it was so well-oiled. Usually by the time there's an auction or a silent auction or a fund to need or whatever, we're ready to do this show. But usually by the time the curtain opens, everyone's so bored and drunk and overfed that we're performing to the backs of their heads. And it's like, whatever, dancers, contortionists, warm up another hour. It's going on forever. In 15 minutes, this man raised $500,000 for the organization. 15 minutes. Curtain opens. The audience is completely engaged with us the whole time. We were able to go out. It was really wonderful. It was really an uplifting, one of those rare moments. And I was dressed as a ringmaster. He was dressed as a ringmaster. So at the end, I handed him back the microphone and said on stage, "What an extraordinary job you did. Thank you," whatever. He goes, "I hear you have this really cool house in San Francisco. You still tell me about it. Can I come see it?" I'm like, "Yeah, come over anytime." He came over and he wouldn't leave.
So anyway, 3 weeks into it, we started working together. And to respond to the question about the museum, so we're working together. We had all these jobs lined up and like a lot of stuff for corporations and fundraisers, and COVID hit.
And this is where I'd like Angelica to jump in, if you don't mind.
Yeah, please.
But literally, this is what Angelica, if you can tell us how you came.
So
here.
this is the moment when I joined. In that moment, I was studying marketing and business, and I was looking for internships as part of my credits. And I couldn't find any internship. It was during the pandemic. And one day, one of my friends say, "Why don't you try to find on Craigslist, gigs on Craigslist?" And I was like, I didn't know that was a thing. So I joined Craigslist. I applied, I would say maybe 2 or 3 opportunities. And one of them was social media intern at the Greg Angelo Museum.
Okay.
I applied. I did the interview with 2 people. I met Greg Angelo and Marcelo through Zoom. And I started working on Zoom. I wasn't able to like drive to the city. And then maybe 2 or 3 months later, I came for first time to the house. And then I started working. I did my internship for about a year. And then I started working full time. And now I'm the artist manager.
Now she's my boss.
Oh,
So a couple of questions I have. One, I want to follow up, Angelica, with you, just in terms of like starting an internship, 2020, wild year, even just to think about just starting a job anywhere and having it be all remote and not really, I guess, interacting with people other than Zoom meetings. Like, what was that experience like?
It was difficult. And it was also basically my first experience in a like United States company. I am from Colombia, and I used to like be an au pair. So I used to have a host family. That was my job. And I was looking for other opportunities. And it was the pandemic. And it's still I wanted to try. You know, I was like, it doesn't matter the pandemic, the world is changing, but I want to find another opportunity. And then at the beginning, it was difficult. I didn't have experience, so I didn't know how to create content without being here. I was going through the files, to the photos, videos, but it wasn't the same.
Sure, yeah.
Even though, like, my boss in that moment, she was showing me everything that I had to do and explaining to me, until one day we just realized you have to drive there. You have to build the house, and then you can understand what we do, because I wasn't sure, like, what this place was.
Which I'm sure is probably the same for a lot of people, right? Hence Marcelo's question, like, what is this house?
And anybody who visits it and has experience, like, I don't have any words for this, you have to visit. But, you know, I would say meeting Angelica is nothing short of one of those beautiful miracles that happens in life. It was the darkest time, specifically for the arts and entertainment industry, because we were public service. So we were actually the first to be shut down because it was, you know, public gatherings. Other businesses followed. San Francisco was not sure, you know, what to do. So we were just sort of, you know, irrelevant. What was that thing? Non-essential workers. Yeah. And then we fought it. One day I was up at the ranch, Marcelo's ranch, and I saw these beautiful moss-covered rocks. And I said, "Can I bring some of these to the garden at the house?" He's like, "Sure." And that rock, the first rock we set down, it set us on a path where, like, we can work outside. This house has outdoor property. The city's saying we can work outdoors, 1 pot at a time, 6 feet apart. We have a circular garden that goes around the house. We can get them in one end, out the other. Before you know it, we had about 40 interns here in the arts, young, high school, children that were with, in youth programs and youth theater programs were just showing up. And we just created all these makeshift art studios outside, and we started turning the place inside out, still are, and making art and installations that then we actually started curating for the first time is when COVID hit, real stories that were going through the outside of the house. And then Helical is here to kind of help launch it and to figure out how do we market this thing. Well, it was quite a challenge, but we were the only entertainment venue in San Francisco open for 2.5 years. So it was a great opportunity. And I'd like you to elaborate on that.
Yeah.
About the marketing aspect of during the darkest days,
Yeah, I will say when I first came here, I remember like seeing everyone working outside. So I was like, oh, because in my mind, it was just a place with art. That's all. But then when I realized all the like effort and the hard work that they put into creating this little piece or finalizing this project, then I say it's more than that. It's more than just the art itself. So then I would say at the beginning, I didn't quite get like the sell-off point. It took me like a month when I started like driving here more often. And then I realized it's more the stories. It's more like the experience that the guests get here. It's not only the art itself. So I started like doing marketing more like telling a story rather than like selling tickets, I would say, like storytelling through art. That's how I would say we started.
So, Marcelo, what are your responsibilities in this then, from your position as creative director?
Well, I work close with Greg. We do all different things, but I wanted to bring just one point that we were talking about. One of the things that was great about working here is that we did all this art for, there's thousands of artists coming through here. Greg is always on the head of it. He gives you an idea, but he is not the person he is telling you exactly how to do it. He actually gives the artist the liberty to come up with the art, it's unheard of. It's just, you're free to do your art. And we created all these arts everywhere here, hundreds of artists in the last few years.
Well, I sometimes smash it too.
Yeah.
I just did that this morning. I'm like, don't take it personal. My fault.
So
start again.
The art is not based on the story that we're going to tell. And that's the beauty of it. After we're done, we actually write a story to incorporate the art that is designed by the artist here. So what do?
I'll help him with that. He does a lot. So Marcelo's definitely an overachiever. I've never had somebody wear me out as much as he does. And I'm a crazy guy myself. But he really is handling the nuts and bolts of the business. The best thing that he can do for this business is he's the interface between us and what very few clients remain. So we lost probably 98% of our client base, and they're not coming back. The event industry changed. I'm really not that interested in the way it was anymore. And a lot of people are doing very irrelevant work in the event industry these days, and I don't want to do it. So Marcelo's job is to be able to bring our relevance of what we do to beyond what we do at the museum. And that's a really difficult task, and we're doing it. We've been quite successful at it. It's very rare, but we have to find people who are also wanting to move forward in life. We can't, anytime someone says we want to go back to normal, we're like, we're not your people. We're not going back anywhere. And we're seeing a lot of the event industry fail. We're seeing a lot of people closing. We're seeing them fail by simply not interfacing with the guests in a way that's uplifting in them anyway. That's like the flower arrangement does more, to tell you the truth. And I don't mean to be a jerk about that, but we've gotten our asses kicked, all three of us leading artists. And we really learned through experience what humanity needs right now and how to help humanity excel, to heal, to connect, to purge, to laugh, cry, whatever the heck needs to happen in the moment. Humanity's changed, and it's changing.
Well, I want to get into that a little bit, because what you're saying is obviously like people know what they know, right? And particularly when you're looking for running events or outside things where people are going to hire you to do those things, they probably have a very small view of what that can be. And to your point of it being challenging, how do you overcome that? How do you start to get there where you are succeeding at that? Because I got to imagine it's extremely difficult.
It's a very good question. So on a marketing level, it's very difficult because we're marketing something that's kind of not tangible. It's an experience. I always say we don't use experience in that catchphrase trendy way.
Right. Yeah.
We've been doing interactive immersive theater for decades and didn't even know what it was called. I mean, we didn't know that's what it was called because we're so immersed in it. And that's always been the style of what we do. It's hard for us to figure out how do you sell the experience. So what we do is we invite people here. We just invite them here. And those who come, they start to understand the brand of artistry and the impact it has on the human psyche, and as well as the aesthetic beauty of it. And to meet the artists and the care, to see the energy and the power that goes into creating this stuff. It's a magical place. In all seriousness, it is. I always tell people, be careful what you say here because it will manifest. And it does. I think you've all witnessed. You've all seen it happen. You know what I mean? One of the artists downstairs is always like, Greg, where's the black fabric? I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know. I have it all organized by color. She walks downstairs. She comes up. She goes, you won't believe it, Greg. I walked downstairs. A box hit me right in the head. And it was the black fabric. That stuff like that happens all the time here. You know what I mean? It's kind of crazy.
What I wanted to say is that the difference between us and us a few years ago is that we actually went to different events and we performed. We did performative events. Today, because people are coming to the house and seeing the work that we're doing, we're actually getting hired because if we go to an event, even if we are dressed as a clown, we will go deep into what the clients, their idea, their function for their society is about. So we express that.
Well, clients who have a deeper philosophy and a deeper understanding of what needs to happen in this age of information and how it's fracturing people. And there's a lot. We don't have to discuss all that. Are hiring us to figure out, like, how do we get you there? In fact, if I took you downstairs right now, you're going to see 15 artists working. We're now gamifying, for lack of a better word, the kind of antics and activations that we do here and bringing them out into the world, because this installations you see around us, these take 7-8 years to do.
Yeah.
So now we're doing sort of miniature installations, but the activations around them are quite inquisitive and evocative and provocative. And we're being allowed actually to do that, because a lot of times these organizations don't even allow you to talk to people like they're human, So now we're actually being hired to do that.
Yeah. So correct me if I'm wrong here, but it's sounding like there's almost been like a switch almost where the events and things you were doing externally became almost like a marketing vehicle for the museum. And now it's almost as if like the museum itself becomes a vehicle for the events that you can do.
Brilliantly put. It flipped.
Yeah.
I'm going to say something I'm very proud of this week. I've been doing this for a long time. As you know, artists get their asses kicked. I always say it's like being a whack-a-mole. Like you think, oh, great, and then you're knocked down, you get up again. But I'm used to that. I'm fine with it. We're working artists. We're not famous or anything. But San Francisco got really hard hit during COVID, very hard hit. We lost a huge portion of our artists, our culture, our creative scene. It's been tough. And we managed to stay through. And about a year and a half ago, our local supervisor, Myrna Melgar, called and said, this was a series of chains led up to this, and said, I'm doing legislation to landmark your house, not just as a historic property, but as a cultural legacy. In San Francisco, and I didn't know what that meant. Well, a year and a half later, last week, we are now San Francisco's newest arts and culture landmark in the city. So that's kind of a big thing for artists who are not only alive, but actually still making it to be landmark. And they gave us a condition that the art can continue and through perpetuity. So it's been pretty amazing to see how all of a sudden, no one really knew we were here. We're always a secret. All of a sudden, a switch did reverse and all came back to this little magical house. And now we're at a reset where we are, in fact, bringing the work we do here back out into the world in a very renewed way. And if we need to renew again in the future, we'll do that when we get there. But for right now, it's pretty intense.
And it's because people are coming to visit and seeing the change that happens to them into this house. And they get excited about that and they wanted to repeat that in the world. And we've been doing it for many, many years now. They're seeing that and hiring us for that, right?
Yeah. And to go back to one of your early questions about when did the house really become a thing? It was during COVID. It was during COVID when it really became, I was like, you guys, I think we built a theater and didn't even know it. You know what I mean? Here it is. Because we're all thinking, what performance space can we go to? What's this? And I was like, I think we're in it, We opened the windows. We were using inside as stages where performers were hanging out of the windows performing. We did everything we could. People on the roof, wherever we could use a stage. And that's really when it hit. It was just 4 or 5 years ago. And we're like, we focused here. And then Helica really, she was new in marketing. It's a new country, a new language, a new everything for her. And she started navigating, figuring out and we still are. In fact, it's why we're excited to be on the call with you. How do we do this? You know what I mean? Because it's a thing. you know.
But we didn't sit down and make it a strategy. You know, what are we going to do? We just kept doing art and inventing things.
Taking risks.
We never thought, well, we have to reinvent ourselves. No, we didn't. By doing it, we actually reinvented
And once in a while, I'll be like skating across the state. I'm like, in helicopter. Okay, this might be really dumb. And I'm thinking of these SEO words that maybe will get people. And so like that was dumb. But
well, I want to get into some of the marketing stuff here. But before we get fully there, I wanted to ask, you know, you've done a bunch of these things. I saw a clip of the Netflix thing that you had on your site and things you've done with like the Bravo network, and you've been featured in these other. I have to imagine those have been a good boon for you just in terms of bringing more people to the house and more people to the museum and to the site. And just to maybe to give us a sense of scale here too, like how many people do you have coming through in a typical year, let's say, or maybe there isn't a typical year?
Yeah, I think we're finding typical right now. But what would you say, Holger, about how many guests do we have as we increase? It's new for us.
Last year, it was like 500 people, but like every year it's more, you know. Right now, like by June, I think we are in that number.
Okay.
I would say, but I mean, like COVID time, it was way less than that.
Sure.
So we see like every year is increasing and increasing. And now that we offer more experiences and more tours through the house, like we're getting like more demand.
I mean, we're really building a new enterprise with something that we already had. So it's kind of interesting. The tours are small. They only go 6 to 8 guests at a time on the experiences, 4 or 5 times a day. But now we're starting to add an extra day. We're growing it. The house is being rezoned as a commercial entertainment venue. We're building right now. So we had to completely shift how we've ever done business. But we do small events here with 25 to 40 people max. So that not included in the box office count. So it's probably double the number of what she said. So it's small, it's intimate, which makes it very interesting. It's never going to be a place that has, you know, tens of thousands of people. And that's the beauty of it. It's very intimate. It's very personal. It's a very new way for us to work because we used to work for, you know, hundreds or even thousands of people at a time. And now we're like, oh, but we were still doing immersive work. And now we're like, oh man, we're right up here with them. And their 90-minute experiences they're non-performative. Our guides, even though they're all performing artists, are just being their guides. They're not docents. They're not performing artists at that point. Our biggest commission that we got in many years, the first words they told us were, we don't want anything performative at all. They go, we don't costumes. Yeah, no, we don't, no costumes, no production. I'm like, holy but we know you can do it. It was a client who knew me well. I'm like, and then we figured it out. So we're taking this stance as guides, and our costumes are all going to be in white mechanic suits. We're all in black and white with like derby hats on, kind of a race, egoless, and going into this place with about 180 guests and guiding them through about 20 different experiences over 2 days. So it's same style of thing that we're doing here. So it's more, you know, it's more, I think what people are doing these days is looking for some inner peace, some self-healing, whatever it is. Yeah. But we're doing it in a very creative, kind of a provocative way that's a bit more whimsical.
What happens when you take a tour here is that there's so much art to see, and people come to see the art, and they don't realize that actually the art is just a catalyst for them to talk about themselves and to see what they're going through in life. What Greg's talking about, this event that we're going to do next week, is we're actually, the way I see it, is we're making it as a mini kit of the house and taking over there so that we can continue doing the same kind of, you know, the art being the catalyst for them to be able to talk about themselves.
But to go back to your media thing, we've been very, very lucky over the years to be on, you know, Netflix and all these different networks, which always turns out being more about the house than anything else because it's interesting and that's all cool and I like it. And what's beautiful about it is to be back in the day, because I'm older, you know, when you had a TV show, if you blinked, you missed it. And, you know, maybe a few people saw it and they buy a couple tickets or whatever. But now Netflix, this thing was on 6-7 years ago. We continue to get new guests that saw it on Netflix, which is really cool. And it's changed a lot since then. So the marketing now these days, it's amazing how it withstands time a little bit more now.
Yeah.
And you can kind of keep recycling and upcycling older things like that.
Well, Greg, I'm curious, what level experience do you have with marketing? And I know having worked, I come from a theater background myself. And so marketing is sometimes like a dirty word, right? in all of that. So what's your experience with marketing and how do you think of it?
My experience in marketing is none. So what I've always done, and so I grew up in San Francisco, I just always, for years until I met these guys, I put on my roller skates I'd skate across the city. I'd go to every little event that I was invited to. And that's how I did it. I would just show up places. And I don't have any skill in social media. I'm a little bit rough and gruff to be, the front man for the business, but I love people. I love to socialize. I like showing up. So that my form was always show up, invite people. What I do to this day, same thing as I invite once, it used to be twice a week, now once a week, I invite everyone over for lunch. We just did it yesterday. We had 30 people show up, and that's my way of marketing.
Yeah.
And what's beautiful about that now is, Angelica's here, and she can then take that and spider leg it out into the world and all kinds of little stories. But I really have very little experience with it. I'm just a guy that shows up. It takes a lot of energy.
Yeah. So where would you say then marketing ranks on your list of priorities then?
Oh, it's number one. We couldn't run the business without Angelica. It's crucial right now. And I try to understand it. Angelica educates me more. I'm not hands-on with it, but I want to understand it. I want to learn. I want to be able to have good input. She gets texts from me in the middle of the night all the time, like, I thought of this. And we try it. I like Angelica, I'm going to say sometimes things that let's just take a risk and try it. If it fails, whatever. We tried it.
Yeah.
And there's not one person who saw it fail might lead to someone else. I'm not all about, it has to be always expanding into the stratosphere, but keep being artists as well, but keep getting out there,
Yeah.
Angelica has actually taught us was that we don't really need to spend a lot of money to do effective marketing. And that's the beauty of it. I don't know if she wants to talk a little bit about that.
Please go ahead, because I wanted to understand a little bit more how you think through it.
I remember when I studied marketing, like all the time, my teachers were telling me about ads. You need a budget. You need to spend in ads. I know everything about that. So at the beginning, I came with that mind, like, hey, if we need to sell tickets, we need to run ads. But I would say after a year or even a few months, I realized like those are not necessary. And it's more important the content that we create like for people rather than ads, because we can spend like hundreds of dollars in ads and we realize that sometimes they weren't working. But instead, if we create a different content, if we invite content creators or influencers to the house, is more the sales that we get from that than ads. So now my goal is to do more like real marketing, like tell stories. As I said, I asked Greg many questions that I have myself or other like people have about the house. And I think that's the road, not spending a lot of money in marketing.
Yeah.
Well, but it's a lot of effort and time, which equals money in a different way. But it's not throwing money at some corporation. It didn't work because those corporations really do not give a shit about the arts.
Right. Yeah.
Marketing, money. It got to a point where they can, Angelica, what they're asking in money is higher than our ticket sales.
Yeah.
Who are we working for here?
Yeah.
Just quit it. I'm telling you, the day after we quit, what happened? Remember when we quit the ads? I think we doubled in our following. Our ticket sales doubled like immediately, like within a week.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about the storytelling piece of this here, though, right? Because like I think I was telling Kelsey this the other day. It's like, having been in I was marketing for theaters and doing all that. And as I was explaining it to people, again, marketing, dirty word, but it's like, no, our marketing is storytelling. And if you are some of the best storytellers there are, and if you just thought of it that way, and this is a vehicle through which to tell that story, corporations would be paying you money to be able to do it, right? And so,
in fact, they used to.
Yeah, right. And so, I guess, how do you think through it? And do you guys meet regularly? Like, I guess, what's this look like in terms of like, okay, here's what we're going to try, here's what we're going to do. Maybe what's something that's worked, and maybe what's something that hasn't. Like, tell me a little bit about the process you guys go through to think through it.
We do meet once a week together, and we just it's kind of my job to sort of brainstorm about what can we try, what we can do. It's their job to kind of push me to be like, hey, try this, do this kind of show activation. So we do meet for about an hour, just specifically for marketing. We check the analytics, what's going on. We decide if there's going to be a newsletter that goes out through Constant Contact. What's our message? We don't like to hammer people over the head with it, but to just kind of, if we have a message or an offering, our tickets are expensive because it's 6 to 8 people. So lately, we've been trying to figure out what are price points, what are combo tours we can offer. Some of them fail and some of them have been quite successful. So yes, we always try new stuff. One happened the other day on accident where there's indoor and outdoor tours, but we don't have a combo indoor-outdoor tour unless you book it through me and Marcelo, which is stupidly expensive because we have to, curate, we have to do the whole thing ourselves. And some customers showed up for a morning tour that was outside, and then they bought a ticket later for an indoor tour for lunch. And I was like, oh my God, this is great. We can just combo this package. And we did it. And we've been doing, the sales went up.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, people combine indoor, outdoor. The accessibility of going through a box office, making it easy, that they're self-booking, that's what makes it work.
Yeah.
They don't want to be calling and booking and doing all this stuff unless it's an event. You know?
Right, right. So what are you looking for to measure success out of the activities that you are doing from a marketing perspective? Is it just ticket sales or?
Well, for the Gargantua Museum, yeah, it's ticket sales. It's also getting stories out there. It's knowing that we have a following base that might not be able to afford what we do, and then being able to make, to offer them certain specials and to create content that they can still understand what we do. I mean, and Angelica does that brilliantly. I'm not really involved too much in it other than she's a director and we do what she tells us to do. And she's getting stories out there all the time and mixing it up. And some are popular, some aren't. A new thing that I like to work on now that we're a landmark is that, there will be a plaque out in front. But what I want to do is for people that can't come in or can't afford to, I'm going to put several QR codes in front of the art outside. So it gives them not just the story of it, but activations that they have to do right there on the spot. And other directives that take them to other public art installations in San Francisco that are free. So we're going to do a whole kind of a thing where, and that's, I think, is good marketing because it's going to pique their curiosity to not just explore the city, but to come back and be like, we got to check this place out and we'll save the $80 to do this or whatever. That's not really my intent, but I know that will be a little bit of a fishing line to give people a taste of like, here's something here. And I like to welcome everybody in, but if you can't afford it, you can't afford it. We still have to pay the artist.
Sure. Of course. Well, let's get into the constant contact piece here and how you're using that. I guess my first question, Greg, would be to you, like, what brought you to Constant Contact in the first place?
Oh, gosh. Probably somebody that was working here said, hey, there's this thing called Constant Contact. All right, get it. Sure, it sounds good. Let's get it. In fact, I remember in the days where I had one of the costumers, everyone here wears many hats. One of the costumers was running our database. And I think we had to go to some, Kinko's or something at that time to kind of keep adding our database for our mailing list, where we actually were literally physically mailing things out. Then comes the internet. So she'd kind of manage the database, and we would kind of create our own emails that were kind of a mess. But we did. We had a website or whatever. And then the website built, and then the website quickly became a dinosaur. We couldn't keep up. So I think somebody said, oh, there's this thing called Constant Contact that'll, keep the framework, and they have your, they keep track of the database and people that unsubscribe, this and that, and blah, blah. And I was like, oh, that's great. Get it. So I think we've been subscribing for it to, I don't know how many years now. It's been a while.
I think you've been around since 2005, I believe. So thank you for that. Yeah.
How long has Constant Contact been around?
We've been around since, depending on who you ask, 95, 98. So we've been around for a while.
Okay, so we were there kind of at the beginning. That's cool.
Yeah.
We're in San Francisco, so we're right in the heart of technology and all these platforms. And most of our clients, not so much anymore, were always that industry.
Yeah.
We were this huge cultural bridge between the culture of San Francisco and the whole new tech boom, and I loved it. And then that kind of ended.
Yeah.
But I think it'll start again. I think with AI and all that, we're going to start again.
I work within the interface. I'm the one who actually put together the newsletters. They come up with the content and they give me the content and we work. I look for it. I actually love working with, there's a few things that I would love that it would be better, that maybe the colors, there are more colors that we can choose and typefaces and stuff like that. But I know we are limited because of the internet usage, but it's a very easy interface to work with. We came up with a very small newsletter that is very effective.
More like a pamphlet, more like just to keep it, because we're so inundated with stuff. So Marcelo, it's important to know, as a background as a graphic design and packaging design.
Yeah. I was an art director for a big packaging.
Like when you go to Safeway, he designed a lot of those packages. For real.
Okay, yeah.
He understands packaging. And
so I do all the newsletters, and I think Angelica send them out. It's always a collaborative thing. So I love working with Constant Contact.
So that's kind of, he's the interface, and then I kind of do the writing, and I'm the writer. He does the graphics, and Angelica makes sure that it's all going to the right place. And always trying to learn. I'm always trying to push her to be like, okay, which is why we're on here now. I'm always very interested to learn, like, how do we interface with all these platforms that we're using, and how can we put a face to it, and how can we better utilize it, and what's evolving, what's obsolete. I don't know. I just like to keep ahead of it.
Well, yeah. Well, I was going to ask you, because it sounds like you embrace what's happening just in terms of technology and those things where a lot of times people don't, right? And so I'd love to see that you do that. So, well, I'm curious from you, like, I guess when you start thinking about what you are doing from an email perspective, right, and what you're sending, it looks like I think you are doing a very good job in terms of like thinking through different segments. And I'd be curious as how you think about that just in terms of like the different lists that you have within Constant Contact. And then just how do you think through frequency in many ways? Like how often are you sending emails and how do you think through that?
That's a good question. So right now, our main focus is the museum. So our entertainment industry has pretty much fallen off a cliff, though it hasn't. We're still doing it right now. We're very blessed to have a big commission, but there's very little volume in it. So we kind of stopped doing our marketing for like, hey, hire us to do your events or fairs or festivals, whatever. And we just focused on the museum now. So really, to keep it fresh, we do seasonal offerings. Sometimes we do it once a month. Sometimes we do it once a quarter. I don't like going much more than once a month.
Mm-hmm.
I get a little annoyed if I'm getting newsletters from people once a month, even if I'm interested in them.
Yeah.
I'll hold it on to it for a week or so and see what happens. I don't completely understand. I like how you guys send the analytics of who clicked, who opened, who went on the website. That's always helpful for Angelica. We always discuss that at our meetings as well. Like, but sometimes it's hit or miss. Sometimes there's, here's a huge click rate, but well, why?
Yeah.
And then we'll try the same format again and it flopped, but we keep trying. What's great about the three of us being a graphic artist, a creative and marketing, like we're really working together on it, is that we know that the content has to be very crisp and very current and very relevant. I like color. I know a lot of people are sexy. I'm not the sexy black and white type of guy. I like black color, even though I'm all in black. I like to hit it with a lot of color. So does Marcelo. So
the strategy is really, we always make a short, a lot of photos, very relevant short texts, and and fresh.
And several buttons throughout. If you have to scroll, at least 3 buttons that click right to the box office, exactly where your interest is, whether it's for kids or adults or whatever it is.
Got it.
I think most of the times when we got a newsletter that is very long, halfway through, you just give up on it.
Yeah.
So we are 3 or 4 photos, 3 or 4 texts, and the buttons, and that's it.
So I'd be curious to wonder if you've ever thought or attempted or tried to think of email and the things that you're sending through those channels. I mean, this goes for social as well, but as a creative extension of the work that you do at the museum. And by that, I mean, instead of it being strictly about, here, purchase your tickets, or here's how you can book an event, but here's like a small experience, like the email becomes part of the experience that would entice somebody to want to learn more about, wait, what's going on here? Like it becomes the art in many ways to get people excited about it. I'll give you an example of somewhat what I mean here is, so when I was marketing director for a theater, a lot of times, right, similar, people are always like, buy tickets, buy tickets, buy tickets. What I was like, well, wait, like, why should anybody care about buying tickets when they haven't even, like, they don't really know anything about the story, like what's going on with the thing that we're building. So what we started to do was leading up to a show, and these were a little different situation, obviously, than you're in, but what we would do is leading up to a show, we would then start sending a little bit more frequently, but each week it would be more about like the production and what's happening and the people involved in it, and like introducing, like, here are the artists, like, and here's the artistic director, and here are like the stories and interviews with people. So we're storytelling leading up to the launch of the actual story. And then it became buy tickets, right? And so people started to like look forward to the emails because they were learning more about the thing that they were interested in, which was the art and how that was being created, and getting excited about wanting to see it. And so I wonder if you've ever explored anything along those lines to, like, instead of it being just like, we talked about ads earlier, where that's like one thing, but like, what if you flip that on its head a little bit and make it part of the story?
I like it. Angelica does that a lot in the socials.
Yeah.
I really only look at our own social media like once a week. And I enjoy the kind of surprise. She has sort of carte blanche to do everything. I love that to me. And I love that when I see it from other artists or creative people. I love to see the story, what they're working on, what's going on, because it's a nice window into a life you wouldn't see. I like that. We just haven't translated it to not the content we're doing more as a like, I like that. I mean, I'd like to hear more about how that can be successful and,
Yeah. Well, talk to me a little bit about maybe how you, obviously, right, you need the database in order to be able to send to people and all that. Like, are there any particular things, maybe, Angelica, this is a question for you. Are there any things that you're doing to grow that list, to have more people to send to?
We always get like new inquiries through our website. We have our forum, so we get inquiries from there. also from our social media. So whenever I get an inquiry from anybody, I always like add them to our list. I would say, like, going back to your question about the storytelling and how can we implement that to Constant Contact, my focus is that, but in our social media. So it's really a good idea to implement that in Constant Contact some way. How? Because on social media, I see that and they are asking, like, how did you do that? How did you start? Do you have any advice for like young artists like me? And those are the questions that I always ask Greg, and then we create content based on that. So I'm pretty sure we can like utilize that for Constant Contact.
Yeah.
To keep growing our database.
Have you seen some good examples and growth from doing that kind of using social media?
Yeah. Like, so personally, when I've done that, like we saw that really help us a lot just in terms of like when we would get to that place where we're asking people to buy tickets, right? And we would always focus on, because we were doing a limited run of like a show, for example. And so it would be, buy tickets for, it'd be over 3 weekends or something like that. And we focus people on purchasing for that weekend. And so it was always a buildup. Like people were getting excited for, oh, when's the show coming and when can I get tickets, right? So it's like people were looking forward to it rather than it being a thing. So we've seen that work just in terms of engagement and people sharing those things. Like people are always more apt to share the things that are entertaining, as I'm sure you know, right? Versus the thing that's maybe like the buy this kind of thing, right? And so we would always see the engagement kind of go up on those types of things that incorporated that idea in it. Anyway, just a thought, just an idea there.
I like it. I'm thinking like right now, because we've been working really hard. We're building a new installation.
Yeah.
It's for a client, but it's going to end up back in the house. So like maybe that kind of thing. We're building, it's like a new attraction,
Yeah. Like I think that's the interesting thing, right? It's like you're inviting people in, right? Like here's what we're working on without, I know there are some things like maybe you don't want to give away, but even that is in itself is like, we don't want to show you everything because we don't want to give it away, but like, here's kind of the direction that we're going or the thing that we're working on. And if you can tell those stories, I think, particularly to people that, well, I think both ways, right? Folks that are artistic and have that creative thing, like people are like, oh, cool, what are they doing? Right? Because they're interested in it because they want to do things the similar. And then you have the people that aren't creative, but are fascinated by the fact that like, how do you even get to this place, right? Like, how do you create it? And so you tap into people's, on both fronts, their curiosity by sharing the journey of how you're creating it.
I like it. You just inspired me. We have a new experience called Mysteries and Meals. We can kind of tap into thing where they get to go into the studio to see the artist's work.
Yeah.
So we don't let anyone do that except for this one day. That would be actually really cool to do, like show a little bit of the mystery, and then you can come just on this one day in time. And, there has to be a cell somewhere. But,
Of course. Look, we're getting to the top of the hour, so I want to be respectful of your time here. I'd like to ask maybe each of you or one of you, but what would you say would be your best piece of advice? And this could be marketing, this could be business. I'll let you decide it, just in terms of like, what would you say to somebody who's maybe in a similar, maybe earlier in their journey in terms of like where they are marketing, maybe their creative endeavor? What advice would you offer to them?
So I would say my first thing is to enjoy it, because sometimes, and I learned that from Greg, because sometimes, you think that you're doing marketing or you have this task or responsibility and you have to do it, and you take like too serious because you have to make that goal. And when I'm like in a bad mood and I'm like, oh, what am I going to do this week for marketing, and I don't have more ideas, then I just like pause and say, okay, this is fun. And then I ask Greg, so having someone, your team, I asked Marcelo, how can we like create more content? I have this idea, but I don't know how to implement that idea. And some way how we find always like a fun way to like bring that into the real life.
I'll add to that. I'll build on to that. You got to enjoy what you do. I don't care what you do, but you have to collaborate. So I always tell young artists, you cannot do this alone. You find a brother, a sister, mother, a father, cousin, a friend, anybody. You got to work together with somebody because you have different ideas. There's going to be yin and yang, and you need help. Especially creative people. Artists that try to do it on their own are not focusing on their work enough. So I think it's important that it's always collaborative with 1 or 2 people. There's been times I've had 10 people on the team or 16, but right now 3 is good. So.
I'll elaborate on that as well, because to me, it's just the analogy that I have is when you buy a gift for somebody or a birthday gift, you think too much about the person that you're going to give instead of thinking, what is it that you like that person to have? And so if you're doing something that you really like, That's what you're doing. If you start thinking too much of a strategy, who to reach and how to do that, then sometimes you screwed up. And if you're doing something that you really love, then that helps a lot because you're just being real.
Well, friend, let's recap some items from that discussion. Number 1, focus on the content you create. Instead of pouring money into ads that may or may not work, invest your time in storytelling and real engagement. The Greg Angelo Museum found that creating compelling content, whether through social media, influencers, or organic storytelling, drove more interest and ticket sales than paid ads ever could. The key: understand what people are curious about and craft content that speaks to them. Real marketing isn't about spending more, it's really about connecting more. Number 2, try new things. Sometimes the best ideas happen by accident, like when guests at the Greg Angelo Museum unknowingly created a new offering by booking separate indoor and outdoor tours on the same day. Instead of sticking to the old model, they adapted, bundled the experience, and saw sales increase. The lesson? Stay open to new possibilities. Listen to what your audience is already doing and make it easier for them to say yes. Number 3, collaborate on the marketing bits you enjoy. Marketing doesn't have to feel like a chore, especially when you make it a creative, team-driven process. When you hit a wall, step back, find the fun in it, and bounce ideas off the people around you. Whether it's 2, 3, or 10 people, collaboration brings fresh perspectives, keeps the energy up, and ensures that you're not carrying the weight alone. Here's your action item for today. Reimagine how you market your business or creative work. Instead of focusing solely on selling a product or service, consider how you tell a compelling story that resonates with your audience. Is there a deeper purpose behind what you do? How can you make your audience feel like they are part of the journey? What experiences can you create that engage people on an emotional level? Then, take one small step. Create a post, an email, or an event invitation that shares the story behind your work, not just the product itself. See how your audience responds and refine from there. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Be a Marketer podcast. Please take a moment to leave us a review. Just go to ratethispodcast.com/BAM. Your honest feedback will help other small business marketers like yourself find the show. That's ratethispodcast.com/BAM. Well, friend, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and continued success to you and your business.